Hello, Story Seekers. I'm Ben.
I'm Nico, and you're listening to The Tiny Bookcase.
For this episode, we are happy to be joined by a prodigious British fantasy author and short story writer who hails from Lincolnshire. Her debut, The Thief's Gamble, began the Tales of Aneurin in 1999, which was followed by the Aldebrashian Compass sequence, the Chronicles of Lescari Revolution, and the Hadrumal Crisis trilogy.
In 2018, she released The Green Man's Heir, her first modern fantasy inspired by British folklore, and The Green Man's Holiday, released in late 2025, is the 8th title in this ongoing series. She added to this long list of excellent work when in 2023 her novel The Cleaving was published, which is a female-centred retelling of the story of King Arthur.
We would like to warmly welcome Juliet E. McKenna.
Hello, Juliet.
Hello, it's lovely to be here.
Fantastic.
Glad
We were
you
just
think so.
discussing before we came on mic what number you're actually on of how many books that you published, and you're approaching 30, which is just something that needs to be applauded, I think.
I can't even count that high.
You run out of fingers and toes, do you?
Yeah.
Yes, start counting mine. It's awkward when I'm asleep. Do you sort of celebrate each time a book comes out, and has that process changed at all as you've gone into sort of, you've gone into double digits and then gone into the 20s and approaching 30?
Yeah, I mean, it's always a thrill when a book comes out. I put a lot of time, effort, and energy into the books, as does everybody I work with. That's my editor, the artist who does the cover art, the publishers, the publicists. We are all committed to making the best possible book we can, and so it's great to actually finish that process and see the book out there. And then you've got that short period, because people do read fast, while you wait to see if people get what you want them to get out of the book, if that makes any sense at all.
Yeah.
And yeah, I have been doing this a while, so I am confident in my skills. But one of the things that I always aim to do is never write the same book again. So I'm always looking to do something different. I'm looking to take new chances. I'm looking to find a new angle on whatever I'm writing within science fiction and fantasy. And there's always a chance that might not pay off. So there's that little bit of tension, that anticipation, as you wait for people to come back with their verdicts on it. So yeah, it's the thrill hasn't worn off yet.
It sounds amazing. I really can't sort of overemphasize how cool it is to have written and published that many books. And as you say, like, with such a great team helping you each time, it must be really quite something.
Yeah. With this digitalization of books that's happening, has that really changed how it feels to put a book out? Does it feel less solid?
No, I don't think so. The great thing about the digital world is that you can get your books to far more people, and it has the opportunity to work with smaller presses. Wizards Tower Press, who published my Green Man series, it's a very small operation, and Cheryl Morgan, who started the press, set out making backlist from authors like me available as ebooks, because the big publishers, when I signed my first contracts, ebooks weren't a thing, and so big publishers just would let books go out of print, and people would say, oh, how do I get hold of such and such a book? And you'd have to say, second hand.
You don't.
Yeah. That's changed completely, and print on demand, good quality print on demand, means that a small press can make books available pretty much anywhere. So yeah, it's great.
I'll just take that opportunity to just say that I finished The Green Man's Heir, the first one in the Green Man series, last week, and I really enjoyed it. I had a really good time with it, and I thought it was really compelling the way that you wove the folklore in into a very sort of like an actual guy, like a mundane man in many ways. Really enjoyed it.
Yes, I think one of the greatest compliments I've had from a reader is somebody saying, "Honestly, such a bloke."
Yeah, no, he is a bloke. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, there was a couple of times when he's sort of complaining about having to do his own washing, I think, at one point. And I was like, that's me. Um, so I think potentially we should go straight into the stories and see what happens. What do you reckon, Nico?
I think that's quite reasonable. Our regular listeners will know how this part works, but for those of you who are new here, we write stories to the same shared prompt, and all three of us have had a go. Our prompt for this episode is whip. Ben, you'll be up first, so crack on.
Whip. Thick lines of bunting bearing the cross of St George connected both sides of the street, drawing the houses in the North London suburb tightly towards each other to enforce the kind of Englishness peculiar to public holidays. Curtain twitching, Terry kept glancing at his phone to see if the delivery estimate had updated from nearby to imminent. He didn't care much for being patriotic, but he did like football, especially the World Cup. For a few weeks every 4 years, Terry became puffed up with strongly held tactical assessments, which treated geographical and cultural differences as though they were a sound basis for predictive reason, rather than star signs for the footy enthusiast's peculiar brand of harmlessly jingoistic astrology. Not even the constant woe of his recently finalised divorce could resist being swept aside by the simple elation he felt knowing the cup would kick off next week. A little beep from his phone caused him to look up at the sky, and he soon spotted the descending silhouette of his delivery. The drone carrying his robot swooped down, and, as it slowed for landing, got tangled on the bunting. Its high-powered motors hissed with exertion for a moment before the tacky lines of pennants trapping it snapped. No doubt I'll be hearing about this on the Babble, thought Terry, whose habit of hosting large social gatherings meant he was often the subject of the walls of text his neighbours traded back and forth in the WhatsApp group. He had very little doubt they would be organising one of those fashionable anti-AI protests right outside his door when they found out what he'd bought. Even the box looks good, thought Terry, as he handled the heavy thing inside to his kitchen. The words Florabot 3, a home solution from Open Brain, were printed in a stylishly distressed font on the box. Terry saw it also boasted powerful third generation AGI, which he understood to mean artificial general intelligence. And alongside the legal disclaimers were promises of the Florabot's ability to adapt and learn in order to achieve its owner's glorious garden goals. Terry slit the tamper tape guarding its edges and lifted the outer box up to reveal a robot and an accompanying long, thin metal case. Bright silver and durable matte grey, the robot stood as high as his hip and required no assembly. Fluted curves rose up the sides of what could be called its face, and each of those indents concealed a space where arms could extrude and operate tools. It rested easily, perfectly balanced on the 3 spherical feet of its undercarriage. But Terry knew it could hover up to 60 feet to accomplish its tasks. The phrase Florabot 3 shone in the top left corner of its face. Terry looked back at the long, thin case which had come with his Florabot and picked it up, expecting it to be a remote of some kind. Instead, the case clicked open to reveal a bendy metal rod. He took it out and, naturally, whipped it around. It made a satisfying swish as it cut through the air. "What the fuck?" muttered Terry. "Hello, Terry," said the robot, the sound issuing from the top of its face. Hi. Did I press something that turned you on?" He looked for the power button, but couldn't find it. "You activated me by grasping my whip. I'm now performing first startup." The robot silently rolled forwards, seeming to look up at the Wi-Fi password he kept trapped under a magnet on his fridge. "I am now downloading location data such as local weather patterns, soil analysis from Florabots in the area, and other relevant information. Can I ask you something, Terry?" "Oh, yes, shoot." "What are your glorious garden goals?" Florabot spoke like it was hitting on him at a bar, chin rested in its hand, waiting with breathless excitement to hear what Terry had to say. Well, with the World Cup on soon, I'd like to be able to play footy on the lawn without anyone turning an ankle. My mates are all pushing 40 and falling over is starting to mean going down hard, especially after a burger and a few beers. Anything else? I don't want weeds choking up all the beds. My wife Sarah used to tend them, but, well, now she's not my anything that doesn't begin with X. I like the flowers, though. You could look after those too. Glorious, said Florabot, and rolled to the patio door. Small gleaming arms shot out from its sides, so it could let itself into the garden. He noted that it conscientiously closed the door as well, before smoothly sailing out of sight in the direction of his tool shed. He drank a few beers on the patio whilst watching Florabot aerate, clip, and flatten his lawn. He sent his mate videos each time it did a new thing, until they stopped responding. By the time the sun set, Terry had been rendered quite sleepy by the beer, and he thought the lawn looked very fine already. Maybe a Florabot is overkill, but with Sarah gone, well, Terry reckoned, I need the help, and robots are just fucking cool, right? He drunkenly climbed into the big empty bed, had one off the wrist to keep the woe at bay, and fell fast asleep, content. He awoke to the sounds of intermittent thumps and men talking brusquely in his garden. Stumbling out of bed in his haste to get to the window, Terry peered down. Men wearing high-vis were delivering large quantities of bagged-up soil and aggregates, along with bundles of trees and other greenery. His mind, not yet awake, repeated the phrase, "What the fuck?" on a loop as he pulled on some clothes and hustled out into the garden just as the last delivery man left by the side gate. "Florabot!" he shouted. "What can I do for you, Terry?" replied the robot, smoothly appearing from behind a bush. "Where did all this come from?" "I bought it." "With my money?" he asked, incredulous. "Of course. I'm your agent in this regard. I assure you that everything was bought at the most economical price point." "Good! No! You don't spend my money!" Had Florabot shoulders, it would have shrugged. Terry remembered the whip and went inside to fetch it. "Would you even feel this if I hit you with it?" "Yes. I'm programmed to feel pain only from that whip." Terry raised it, ready to thwack the spendthrift robot, but seeing the Florabot cringe away, found he felt uncomfortable about striking it. Instead, he went back inside in a huff and made himself a cuppa. Waiting for it to cool down, he typed, "Should I whip my robot?" into the browser on his phone. The search returned dozens of short videos showing scantily clad teenagers whipping their home robots in time to the latest viral track, as well as several ponderous Substack articles written by earnest millennials on their high horse about the history of slavery repeating itself, most of which were probably written by AI anyway, Terry reckoned. He put his phone down and tried to actually think about it for a moment. He reckoned that there were probably only two logical, if brutal, reasons to use a whip. Either that a creature is too dumb to respond to anything other than pain, or they are so intelligent that their low position in the hierarchy needs to be enforced. In either case, he didn't like the idea of doing it, and decided to mull it over on his way to work. London was thick with protesters, demanding democratically informed processes around the emerging dominance of AGI in every job sector. Terry tried not to look like someone who had just bought a brand spanking new robot, even going so far as to raise a fist in solidarity. That evening, a tired Terry arrived home to find the Florabot waiting for him. "How was your day?" it asked. "Okay, thanks. Yours?" replied Terry automatically. "You said to change anything that might remind you of Sarah. I have been successful in this." Florabot set off through the house, and Terry found himself following along behind it. "I don't think I did say that, did I?" Florabot did not respond, but instead opened the patio door. Beyond was an exquisitely manicured vista of greenery lit by the setting sun. Terry stepped onto grass, smoother than any pitch he'd ever played on. The hedges had even been trimmed into busts of his favourite players, although he wasn't sure how it had found that out. Yet, something was missing. Where are all the flowers? They are here. Florabot pointed at the single rose bush that remained. But what about the little ones? The little yellow ones? Those purple tall ones shaped like bells, and the... He fished for the name of one he could remember. Daisies? Those are all classified as weeds and have been removed as per your instructions. Terry fetched the whip, and this time he used it.
It was horrible. I was deeply, deeply uncomfortable. Really well written, but deeply uncomfortable. I think in part because of the saucy little voice you gave the robot. I don't like to hear you speak in that way, my friend.
Little bit of bedroom voice for a robot.
Yeah. My first note says the saucy voice you've given the robot is too much.
That's the law of unintended consequences, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh gosh. Yeah. No, I had a lot of fun with that one. You could tell the World Cup's on my mind as well. I had to go in there somewhere.
It's interesting. It reflects, so much that's buzzing around online communities and conversations and things that are in the news at the moment.
Yes.
Yeah. I felt particularly attacked by the depiction of a man who's not too bothered about football until the World Cup rolls up and then becomes an expert.
It might have been aimed at you a little bit, don't worry. But it does always fascinate me, though, that moment where people suddenly got very strong opinions about a sport that they don't really follow that much, and they're based entirely on, like, Spaniards being Spaniards, and, oh, the English will do this, and the French will do that. It's like, is this true? Is this true in any way? I don't think so.
It's a truism rather than a truth, isn't it?
Truth adjacent.
Yeah. Truth adjacent is a very good way of putting it. No, you mentioned that it was sort of topical. A while back, my partner sent me a video on YouTube called "We Are Not Ready for Superintelligence," and it was a video put together by a company called 80,000 Hours, and it's sort of like a narrative report on what AI could do with AGI, and it's harrowing and terrifying in equal measure. And I fully recommend it to anybody listening. It's well worth a watch. It's about half an hour long, so it's very digestible. But I felt quite inspired to write something with it, and Whip seemed like the right place to do it.
It's a fascinating concept as well. I always like the idea of robots that are programmed to feel pain. It seems like such an unnecessary thing, but to further it into it being your way of chastising your robot is to give you a pain device. It's sort of a deeply horrid thought, but it's also very human, isn't it? I think that's what made it so effective.
Rossum's Universal Robots is in fact a play about slavery, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I thought it was interesting that you can punish the robot, but apparently you cannot actually switch it off.
You can't switch it off, yeah. I found that sort of came unbidden from my mind, and I found it so creepy I had to leave it in.
Because this is one of the things about AGI, can computers take over the world? Not as long as they've got an off switch.
Yeah.
Well, clearly one of the first things that they will do is remove or hide their off switch.
Yes, absolutely. The original draft of the story had him not be able to whip it at all, and he sort of calls the support, which is also an AI, and then a different AI robot turns up to whip his robot, and I just thought, okay, this is funny, but it's really overdone. I was like 300 words over my word count, so I cut it and it went a different way.
It would undercut the sort of study of Terry's humanity as well, wouldn't it? If he got to outsource the inhuman punishment.
But there was a sort of Benny Hill moment of like one robot chasing another robot around. Yes.
It's interesting that he doesn't lose it with the robot over the money, though he doesn't exactly know how much it's spent, but it's the loss of the flowers. It's the emotional impact is the point that makes it possible for him to actually start thrashing the thing.
Yes. I'm in a very happy relationship, so I don't know why this sort of divorced dad energy came out in this character, but I think it was just this last bit of beauty that had been held between them in their relationship being removed by a sort of homogenizing act from this robot, just sort of not being able to distinguish between what's beautiful and not classified as a weed and what is technically a weed. Yeah, it's I don't know. I think if somebody came and pulled up all my flowers, I might have a go at them, and I probably would maybe punch them. Yeah.
I'll report back in a later episode about whether he whipped me, audience.
Great. Okay. Well, thanks for listening. And Juliet, would you like to read your story?
Okay. Right, I have slightly cheated in that I have given it a 2-word title, which is Whip Hand.
Excellent.
Hurry up! I want to see the whole race. Jane scrambled up the grassy slope, long-legged and eager. Some who had already claimed places on this hillock noted the quality of his boots and clothing. They politely made room for the youth. A year or so older, a head taller and heavy-set, with a neatly groomed dark beard, Marmac followed as fast as he could. He nodded acknowledgment to those who stepped aside, striving to commit their faces to memory. One or other of these men or women might knock at Jurist Danael's gate, or be called before her travelling tribunal. The jurist would want to know who had crossed paths with her heir. Learning whether they expected repayment for today's courtesy, or if that wouldn't have occurred to them, would be a useful indicator of character. The sword and dagger on his belt ensured onlookers made way for Marmac. He stood beside Jane, surveying the white-railed racecourse on this side of the horse fair's vast sprawl. This hillock was an excellent vantage point, at the cost of the wind's chill. Snow still capped the distant mountains. Hearing gruff laughter, he returned his attention to those closer at hand. Ida of Greenford, I'll give you 10 silver to your 1 for a win. A prosperous merchant with fox fur trimming his cloak glanced speculatively their way. When Marmac met his gaze with a brief but definite shake of his head, the man resumed his conversation. Hadram of Lance Valley, I'll give you 1 silver for each gold wagers. His jewelled rings glinted in the sunshine as his hand cut short the gambler's protest. You won't do better elsewhere. Jane wasn't listening. His attention was fixed on the horses jostling behind the net, strung between the starting posts. Faint snorting and stamping floated up on the breeze. Note the winner's colours, Ma. Every black-clad rider had bright silk ribbons knotted above their elbows. Marmac doubted the oldest could be half Jane's age. He wondered about such children's lives working for a horse breeder. Each morning he thanked the living flame the jurist had chosen him when she purchased her firstborn's companion from the foundling refuge. The starting whip's crack cut through the air. The net dropped into its narrow trench. The horses sprang forward. Each one fought to outpace its rivals, intent on reaching the far end of the long, straight track. Every rider lay flat against their mount's outstretched neck, clinging on with knees and ankles, reins wound around their hands. Inside a few breaths, the leaders left the rest to inhale their dust. Jane shifted from foot to foot. See him go, the chestnut! I do. Marmac shaded his eyes with a hand to be certain of the rider's colours, scarlet and ivory. The racing horses swept past the quarter mark. As the animals galloped towards the halfway point and then the three-quarter post, Marmac wondered what such breakneck speed felt like. Jurist Danael's steward selected her carriage horses for steady paces and stamina. When the stolid animals were saddled for an excursion, neither Marmac nor Jane could persuade them to make haste. Shouts which couldn't possibly reach the horses urged them on. The chestnut's lead lengthened. Neither the bay nor the roan following could close the widening gap. As the chestnut horse passed the winning posts, the shouts grew louder. Marmac realised the true race was for second place. The roan's plunging head drew level with the bay's haunch, its nose edged towards the bay's shoulder. Resolute, the bay strived to outpace the challenger. The roan slipped back. The bay reached the finish post first. A sizable number on the hillock groaned, tossing aside potsherds with their choices scratched through the glaze. Those smiling were a substantial group, but Marmax saw the merchant with the sideline in wages was unconcerned, telling those presenting ceramic scraps bearing his name to find his tent to settle. Jane only had eyes for the chestnut. "Did you see, Ma? He nearly covered the same distance again before he slowed after passing the post." "Your lady mother didn't send us to buy a racehorse." "I know," Jane said, impatient. "But we'll find what we want in that reader's compound. Whose colours are scarlet and white?" "A hadron of Lance Valley." The merchant paused as he passed them, looking speculatively at Jane before he addressed Marmax. "Visit Tamman of Silk Falls as well, green and orange." "Come on!" Jane was already hurrying down the slope. This valley, where the foothills met the riverlands, was close to a junction of several major roads. Countless folk in search of draught horses, saddle mounts, breeding stock, or yearlings for training flocked to the horse fair. The paths between the canvas-fenced enclosures were so crowded it seemed impossible to take a step without treading on somebody's foot. As harsh voices rebuked someone who had lost their way, Marmax was glad his height helped him see the colourful flags fluttering over tent roofs. Eventually they reached Hadram's substantial compound. There was a broad-shouldered man with cold blue eyes, smiling as men and women offered their congratulations. Others studied the race winner from a prudent distance. The chestnut horse shivered, sweating, its dark eyes white-rimmed. It fought its halter as two stable hands sought to unsaddle it. The child rider was nowhere to be seen. "What are you doing?" Hadram's bellow cut through every discussion. He strode through the wary silence to a picket line of placid mares. A grey-haired woman in voluminous skirts, with a thick shawl around her shoulders, was bending over to run her hand down a dappled grey's hind leg. "Don't imagine I'll sell to you." Hadram's contempt would have been excessive if she'd been picking through a midden for food. "Mule breeder." "Up to your usual tricks?" The woman straightened up, wiping her palm on her skirt. "Don't fret, I'm leaving." As she strolled out of the compound, chatter resumed. Before she vanished into the crowds, Hadram's smile was as broad as before. The stable hands coaxed the chestnut horse into a canvas-roofed sanctuary. A man with a weathered face and wearing a tunic in Hadram's colours approached Jane and Marmax. "How may I serve you?" "We want saddle horses," Jane said quickly. "Fast-footed, like that racer." The man gestured beyond the tethered mares. "We have geldings in the rear enclosure." "I must try their paces," Jane insisted. "Of course," the man assured him. Following them, Marmax saw a hazel hurdle served as a gate from this rear enclosure into an open space within the horse fair. He'd wondered at those voids when he'd seen them from the hillock. Now he saw a stable hand pull the woven sticks aside as a sturdy woman approached, leading a dun horse and rider. While the weather-beaten man extolled a black mount's virtues to Jane, Marmax watched the dun's prospective buyer rouse the horse from a walk to a trot to a slow canter. Some distance away, other steeds were being assessed while their breeders watched. The hoof-pocked grass was completely enclosed, so no thief could simply ride off. Jane opted not to try the black's paces. After 2 further demurrals, the trader offered him a chestnut gelding. Jane's eyes brightened, and a stable hand brought saddle and bridle. The youth mounted, gathered the reins, and rode past the hurdles. Somebody, somewhere, cracked a whip. Jane was urging the chestnut to trot in a circle. Marmax could only watch helpless as the horse bolted. Other mounts shied out of its path as Jane was unable to stop its headlong flight. Marmax's throat closed with fear, realizing the panicked creature thought it had seen an escape. He saw stable hands hurry to block the gap with hurdles. The chestnut would surely crash into them. 2 mules lumbered out of another enclosure. The riders swiftly flanked the chestnut, their heavy-headed steeds easily matching its pace. The mules closed in, one on either side, deftly forcing the bolting horse to slow. The trio halted, just short of disaster. Marmax was already running. By the time he arrived, the woman Hadram despised was instructing Jane to run his hand down the chestnut's hind leg. The animal was going nowhere, still firmly held by the sturdy mules. "Feel the welts under that colouring?" The mule breeder nodded as Jane showed her brown smears on his palm. Hadram trains with a lash on their hocks, so his horses know only fear. That's cruelty to honest beasts and false dealing with those who buy them. Van Tammon's green and orange pennant. He'll sell you a willing servant, not a beaten slave. As willing as your brave mules. Jane's voice shook. Hardly. The breeder laughed, scratching an inquisitive mule's hairy chin. I work with partners. Hearing raised voices, Marmac turned to see an irate crowd converging on Hadram's enclosure. Looking back as the mule breeder walked away, he noticed the stock whip coiled around her belt.
I thoroughly enjoyed that. There's
Absolutely.
such good use of pace, like the start of the race and when the horse bolted, you could feel that change up in speed in the writing. That was absolutely fantastic.
I had a lot of fun writing that. You can tell I'm working on epic fantasy at the moment.
Yeah, no, you could feel your world building muscles flexing really, effectively in a small space.
That could have been 5,000 words without pausing for breath.
I just want to agree with Nico. Actually, I wrote it down because I think I'm always a bit obsessed with how pacing devices are deployed, and this one felt very organic. Like the idea of a horse race provides a very organic feeling pacing device. It gets people up to speed fast. They know what it should feel like, what it should sound like, how fast those things are flying forwards. And that was used really effectively because you didn't have a lot of words to tell that story, and it felt like it felt breakneck at the points that it needed to feel breakneck. And it's something that I know that I need to work on, and you just deployed it easily, and it was really a delight to see. I really enjoyed the pot shard scratched, with the bettering slip through the glaze. So I immediately wrote down, no paper? What does that mean? And sort of started doing that moment where you're getting into a fantasy novel and you're like, well, if that's true, then that means that this might be true too. Yeah, I enjoyed this a lot. I thought it was really well described and really well paced. Loved it.
Well, the pot shards thing comes from my background as a classicist.
Right, okay.
Because in the ancient world, in the ancient Mediterranean world, archaeologists dig up bits of broken pot with things like shopping lists and memos and people's reminders and diaries and agreements to meet and things like that. They really were used as scrap paper.
Gosh, I had no idea. That is a really cool little factoid. I nearly asked you at the start of this whether you had like a favorite, anecdote or like moment in history or like interesting facts from your time studying classics. And so I'm actually really glad that I didn't, because that was just a complete surprise to me. I enjoyed the naming conventions as well, like the kind of alliterative Marmac, Jane. It felt real, like quite quickly. It felt quite real. I suspect you've got lots of practice at naming characters. Do you have a sort of like a foolproof method that you do it, or do they just pop into your head?
No, I basically sit staring at the keyboard. I turn around and look at the shelves
of
books in my study. I will quite frequently grab something that looks vaguely related, look in the bibliography or the index, and find inspiration there. For this particular story, I've got a book called Night, Horses and the Desert, which is about classical Arabian and Persian poetry. And I found words that I could slightly tweak and adjust in the index from that to create these names.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, straight up.
I'm fully stealing that, by the way. Just it's on the record now. Everyone knows that I'm doing it, but it's happening.
It works for me.
Go on.
I spent the whole time wondering if the Chekhov's sword and dagger on Marmac's belt were going to get pulled. I had a horrible feeling he was going to stab that chestnut horse in the face when it was bolting. But I think that's my time doing tabletop roleplay with Ben coming out.
Yeah. Just freakish moments of violence. No, I thought that was a really good way to establish the protective aura around this youngster. Did I catch it right that the jockeys were all children as well?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that was a really fascinating thing for me, where there's this one child is being protected at all costs, and people might even be rewarded for crossing paths with her, and then other children are riding at literally breakneck speed for people to gamble on. I thought it did a lot of heavy lifting in not a lot of words. Again, I think there was a great deal of economy to this very elegant world building. I liked it.
And again, that happens in camel racing. Children are used as jockeys in camel racing. So much of what I write is things I have come across, things I have read, things I have observed that just suddenly coalesce in the back of my mind. I mean, the start of the idea, the whip. Okay, whip hand control. Who's in charge? Who's really in charge? Things like that. This is how the thought process starts for me.
Really, really enjoyed it. I think the only other thing that I wanted to talk about was the sort of the love of mules that permeated it. I think a lot of people, because obviously it's quite easy to love a big, beautiful horse, isn't it? But love of mules, that feels like that might be, accurate to how you feel.
This is one of the marvels of social media. On Blue Sky, I follow a historian who has done a lot of work on the use of draft animals, horses, mules, donkeys, whatever, in history, particularly in the Second World War. And every so often she'll post a little snippet from something that she's discovered. And certainly within the last fortnight, she posted a reminiscence from somebody, I think in Burma, whose mule refused to cross a bridge. And basically, they could have whipped this mule raw, and the animal was not shifting. Stubborn as a mule, it's a phrase for a good reason. And it turned out the bridge was unsafe.
Classic.
And again, marvels of social media. One of my long-standing readers is a horseman who also has a mule. And every so often we've had conversations about his mule. And mules are really interesting things because they are clever. And so everybody looks at the horses, the glamorous chestnut, the racing, all the rest of it. Yeah, you want a job doing, often you're better off using a mule.
Using a mule. What was the name of the Blue Sky account with the deep dive on draft animals?
Check.
While you're looking, it makes sense that mules would be clever because their fathers are donkeys who managed to chat up a horse, so they've got some game, haven't they?
Right. This is where we get into technicalities about mules.
Oh, is it the other way around?
I think that's a donkey.
No, I think a mule is a donkey sire and a mare.
Yes.
But no, mules are interesting things. Let's have a look. Lucy Bettridge Dyson is the military and animal historian who I follow on Blue Sky, and she has some really interesting things.
Fantastic! Right, that's getting a shout out, and I will. I'll also make sure that we follow them. We'll follow her as well. Because I love that kind of little factoid. Military and animal historian, great. Oh, fantastic. Well, thank you so much for writing to that prompt. I can feel that it's really interesting the way that we've all gone with it. So I'm fascinated to hear how, Nico, you've done it.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, it is a return. Part 5 in the Prime Minister's saga. Whip. They're trying to replace me, the braying mob. Great slobbering canine invertebrates, barking at the moon they scarce comprehend. Sisyphean, the whole thing. The Prime Minister let the wooden blind panels clatter to stillness, no longer concerned with the people beyond. They were common folk. His purview, certainly, but not his problem. The people are simply feeling strong feelings about the current situation. MP for West Bridgington, Samantha Burstow, sat tense as a fox in a factory farm. This was the most official that duty could be. But it wasn't fear that gripped her. It was the ravenous hunger of one who foresaw what they believed was a well-earned promotion. Feelings. The Prime Minister let the word ooze from his mouth, like pus from a sore. Feelings are a boulder before the train tracks of progression. The great steam engine of my government shan't be halted because some bleeding hearts say things ought to change. Burstow allowed her eyes to leave the PM's back and look over his desk. Dozens of folders were stacked haphazardly, the black tape that marked them as sealed documents unbroken. She repressed a tut. The Prime Minister had chosen that moment to turn, and his watery porcine eyes were boring into Burstow. In spite of their pale quality, they held a laser intensity. Something predatory lurked behind his jowls and soft, eaten mess bloated features. "You're quite right, Prime Minister." That was a safe bet, and one that had, at least to Burstow's knowledge, never led to an MP's immediate firing. An awful lot of MPs have been fired lately. Or defected. Greener grass on the other side of the political spectrum and all that. Quite right, quite right. The Prime Minister hefted his impressive bulk into a high leather chair on his side of the desk. A squeak escaped it. Burstow did not know if it had come from the leather or the wood. "You are, of course, aware of the current plans on the other side of the pond?" Burstow was not. She wondered how much of it was in those sealed files. She wondered how much was whispered promises of power on that gleaming desk phone. She wanted a gleaming desk phone, so she played along. "Of course, Prime Minister. Jolly good plans, too." That had been a risk. If it turned out that madman in America was planning to turn London into a car park, that might have been a misplay. "Yes, see, I knew you were the right sort. Visionary, really, his ideas. Going to revolutionise the way things were done." No, poor choice of words. Revolutions are the poor man's attempt at politicking. They're going to... He chewed the air as though globules of idea fat were being ground between his teeth. "Cement the right-thinking man's belief that we and our allies in the United States are the most closely aligned superpower the world has ever seen." This was all sounding like it might be quite serious. But Burstow had made her career out of a winning smile and the ability to slot comfortably into any regime. She put both skills to the test. "That sounds excellent, Prime Minister." She leant forward in a practice manoeuvre that screamed, "Tell me more. In fact, tell me everything." The Prime Minister ploughed on. "Of course, the pencil pushers and the left-wing media are going to have a bloody field day with it, which is where party unity comes in. Important to be a united front in the face of adversity. Can't have any more bloody bead encounters and ne'er-do-wells going on morning television and talking about a division in the party or a rudderless bloody ship. This ship is all rudder, as far as I'm concerned. We've had the strongest navy in the world for all time. Victorian London managed the world by sea. Absolute piff-paff to say rudderless." The Prime Minister steamed slightly as his rising blood pressure warred with the patina of sweat he always wore. "Of course, Prime Minister. Strong within and without." The PM nodded, sending some of that errant sweat to dot his unopened files. "Had to let Kendrick go. Went on bloody Radio 4 and called me a coward. Said I was belly up for the Yanks. Never mind he was backside up for China the whole time he was whip." Was this true? Had Kendrick been a Chinese spy? Burstow made a note to confirm that he had been, and that the Prime Minister had told her, to anyone who asked. Then it clicked. Was whip. His position was open. "Which of course is where you come in. New initiative starting. It's the young people, you see. They've had their brains eroded into wibbling mounds of raspberry jelly and laminum. They can't understand metaphor, and even less so politics. So we're taking a more literal stance." "More literal, Prime Minister?" Burstow leaned even further forward. She was at risk of snaffling a bite of the PM's tie. "Yes. No more symbology. Just symbols. I'm inviting you to be our new whip. Lay about yourself and get this party in order. Spare the rod, spoil the child, and this country is rotten." Burstow's face must have given her away. The porcelain-thin veneer of political perfection had slid clean off. "Oh, don't make that face, woman. This is Westminster, not Soho. We won't have you with a corset and riding crop, although that may test well in some areas." The PM considered it a moment, then moved on. "No, you ought to be responsible for delivering public lashings to those we consider dissidents internally." The PM stood again and moved to the window, lifting the blinds to once more look at the rabble outside through his slit. "Internally, I say, at first. You should get the people going, bit of the old corporal. Show them that we aren't playing games. We mean business. They'll fall in line or fall foul of the whip." Burstow managed to croak "Yes, Prime Minister." "If this war is going to work, then I can't have people banging on about sending money to the Eastern Bloc because they can't defend themselves. They can just crumble. The Arabs will be infighting again soon enough. If we have our government and her people in line, then we can mop up the mess. Alongside our friends in the Americas, of course. 50-50 split. To the victors go the spoil. Arum amortuis sublatum. And you'll be leading the charge. Who knows? A few years you might even sit in my seat here." That was the galvanizing stroke she had needed. She had turned a blind eye to some truly horrible policies already. She'd voted in favour of enough evil to last a lifetime. This time, she'd be on top of the heap. "It's an honour, Prime Minister." "Yes," he sneered. "It is." The PM moved back to his desk, slid the errant files into a pile, then tossed them piecemeal into the bin. "This is the opportunity of a lifetime, Miss Whip. You're going to be the face of a new, sterner Britain." "Yes, Prime Minister." As she said it, she stood, knowing the end of a meeting when she saw one. "Oh, and Burstow, don't fuck it up. Hanging's back next. You don't want to be the example for that one, do you?"
Jesus Christ, he's back.
The Prime Minister is back.
What just an absolute ramrod of a story. It just flew past. I wrote down that it is obvious at this point, I think, from anybody listening, but you are one of my favourite writers, and this recurring character of the Prime Minister, because Juliet, this is the 5th time that he's written a story about this Prime Minister.
I'd like to correct you, it's the 4th I've written.
Oh, 4th, yeah.
Yeah.
I wrote the first one during Boris Johnson's tenure at number 10.
Did you tell?
Yeah, fuck. Was whip. House of Cards stuff, man. House of Cards stuff. Really enjoyed it. There was one of the lines that made me really chuckle was, "This was all sounding like it might be quite serious." Oh, very funny. Real threat in this woman getting like glass cliffed, I think they call it, where these sort of like horrendous people in power put someone like put a woman in charge of something in order to roll something out that's really unpopular.
Yeah.
Really unpleasant politicking that. Yeah. Juliet, what did you make of it? Oh, sorry, you are muted currently.
I'm in mouse cursor for a moment.
That's
right,
okay.
yes. Very interesting. I like what you did with cliches. Spare the rod, spoil the child.
Yeah.
To the victor, the spoils. Somebody who thinks in cliches, giving that characterization told us so much about that individual very, very effectively and economically. And here we're looking at the whip, the driving force, the goad being political ambition.
Yeah.
I mean, it's fascinating how we've got 3 such completely different stories with the same prompt. Again, a lot of what's going on in the world around us reflected in this story, I feel. And that's that sense of danger. That, yes, people can treat these things as a joke, but things can become very serious very, very quickly. I think one of the things that frequently irritates me about some broadcasters is they treat it all as a game. And actually, it's not a game to an awful lot of people. The consequences when petrol's going up by 10p a litre overnight for somebody who's got to count every penny are a lot more serious than somebody who's went to Eton. I thought it was a very, very interesting story. But also, you've got a man apparently in control, apparently powerful, but he's sweating.
Yeah.
He is driven by fear of popular reaction. So again, where is the control? Who has got the power here? What are the goads, the whips that are driving people on? Interesting stuff. And the hints of dominatrix. Again, when you think back to some of the scandals and rumours that have swirled around Westminster over the past couple of decades, again, it conveys an atmosphere without ever actually having to explicitly state it, which I think is always very difficult to do in a short story, but it's one of the things that's essential in a short story, because you don't have that space to build and develop and expand on the setting that you do in a novel.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting time to be writing political stories, because everyone is the most aware of what's currently happening politically they've ever been, because it is every single day we get updates, and we probably aren't getting the truth of most things, but we at least have an idea of who's playing the games. So that's something that fascinates me. Everything is recorded, and it's meant that politicians are at least having to keep their lies consistent, which is, although not all of them are, it has made the political piff paff, the political landscape just so much more vivid than it has been in the past. You'd get the newspaper that might say one thing in the day, but now it's 24/7 non-stop updates, someone saying something and everyone in the world can see it right now, and then the AIs get to it and they said something else. And what a time to be alive.
It's certainly interesting times. Belly up for the Yanks when he was backside up for China is an excellent turn of phrase.
Also, I love trying to emulate the way that Boris Johnson speaks, throwing random bits of Latin in, but it's just being aware that I'll never reach great supine protoplasmic invertebrate jellies, which is something he actually said in front of a room full of politicians. Like, reality will always outstrip my ability to construct lunatics, and that's, I guess, kind of wonderful in its own way.
There was quite a lot of reality in him describing his government as a steam engine. I thought that was fascinating. They're sort of like very pridefully describing it as like, it won't be the boulder that stops my steam engine. To pick such like an outdated mode of transport. Really, really strong stuff from the start. Went all the way through. I enjoyed this kind of politically climbing character. I think we're all aware of various MPs that have just voted in order to gain position in the cabinet or whatever.
I did like your use of leaning in.
Yes.
Because, of course, that was a book, I believe, by some supposed expert on how women should attain power without actually being treated as equals. They should use their feminine wiles. And it was, girls, you've got to lean in. Presumably with a very low-cut blouse on.
Yeah, I think I'm always careful writing women because I do not have that lived experience. But I think this idea, you can use these ideas with a politically ambitious woman who would know these are the tricks to play on these kind of men to get what I want. I think that's pretty universal. I don't need to have lived it to know that a clever woman would do that. And unfortunately, in this case, it's caught her in not the best position.
Yes, but again, you've got this thing that corporal punishment being reintroduced as a first step towards bringing back hanging, and it's that ominous populism that is it's the race to the bottom.
Oh yes. I'm glad I could bring some cheer. Goodness me.
Yeah, I feel like if the current political elite brought back executions in this country, then they might find themselves quite quickly in line. So there was a degree of sort of like hopefulness to that ending to me, where I was like, oh, okay, so some people might get hanged, but maybe we might get to hang David Cameron. Like just thrown out there, that would be interesting if that was happening.
Well,
yeah.
I find the most effective argument for the hang 'em and flog 'em brigade is to point out that in cases of corporal punishment, or systems that have capital punishment rather, more murderers go free.
Really?
Yeah. People will strive to acquit. And I mean, I was told this by a barrister some years ago, and I have seen a couple of articles that do the numbers. Basically, if the death penalty is on the table, more murderers go free. So actually, if you want an effective system of justice, the death penalty is not your friend.
It's the idea there being it's so final that people actually balk at using it.
Yeah.
That's interesting, isn't it? Fascinating.
Again, these little things that I pick up here and there that stay with you, and sometimes they come out in a story.
This is like having Dictionary Corner. I really like it.
There is a long list of people who refuse to play Trivial Pursuit with me.
Me too, for very different reasons.
Three very different stories, I think. I enjoyed both of yours. So thank you so much for writing. I was extremely tickled by yours, Nico, and I really enjoyed the world building and pacing in yours, Juliet. It was really good stuff.
Give yourself some credit too, young man. You were part of this trifecta of loveliness.
I'd say absolutely fascinating to see how, starting from the same one-word prompt, we come up with three very different stories.
Yes, definitely. I felt in particular the approach to it being a political position was as soon as I realised what you'd done, Nico, I was like, oh yeah, I probably should have done that. Really enjoyed it. Fantastic.
I'm trying to think of commonalities between the stories, and it does come back. They all do come back to a certain extent to what drives people. Any intentions, what people are hoping to achieve, and whether or not they do. That is it. Very, very broad brush, but I think that's as far as I can get to finding commonalities between them.
Yeah, no, I like that. I think that does connect all three. There was, in terms of like the actual content, both Nico and my story had the leaning in thing that you mentioned, but mine was from a robot poorly executing it. And it's odd when you start seeing things like that occur, as you say, from three very different stories, but from a similar sort of starting point, from the same starting point. It's fascinating every time we do this. And
we both have weaponized flirtation. I don't know how we got there from whips is for the psychologists in the audience.
Well, I think that one might be. There's definitely a sort of sexualized element to it. I think you mentioned the sort of dominatrix angle that Nico had mentioned. I think that's definitely in there somewhere, isn't it? But yeah, you've got to leave yourself open to that kind of thing and just go for it. Just before we end this episode, I think it's really important, Juliet, that everybody listening knows where they can follow you for your news and any updates that you might have, and also where they should buy your books.
My social media that works for me is Blue Sky, Facebook, and Mastodon, and I am everywhere as Juliet E. McKenna. My Green Man books are published by Wizard's Tower Press. If you go to their website and find the page for any particular book, there is a whole list of purchase options from different retailers, national and international. If you want to avoid the Big Muddy River, if you are happy to buy your books from the Big Muddy River, you will find them all there as well. This year I've got 2 books coming out. The next in the Green Man series, which I will be revealing the title at EasterCon, weekend after next, and a new epic fantasy called The Riven Kingdom, which comes out from Angry Robot in October. I've written short stories for a collection currently being kickstarted by Newcon Press of celebrating 20 years since we lost David Gemmell, The Iron Code. I've got a story in that. And I've got a story in another collection that's coming out later this year, so I'm quite busy. I have a website, julietemckenna.com, with a blog that gets updated when I can find time. I have been so busy lately. I don't do a newsletter because I am rubbish at them. But if you can sign up to get an email when I do get around to updating my blog, which is probably the best way to keep current with my news. So
fabulous, thank you. I was going to note there actually that I think your blog is actually pretty frequently updated. I think you're doing yourself a disservice there. We have a lot of people on who are like, oh, I've got a blog. I update it maybe once every 3 years. But you've had 3 or 4 posts this year, so you're well on the way.
Oh yeah.
Another question before we end. Sorry, Mastodon. Is that still going? Is that because I remember it was like the competitor that people got really excited about.
Yeah, it's interesting. I have very different communities on all these the different social medias that I use. So yeah, and these are the ones that work for me. This is where I find congenial people. And yeah, I am not a visual person, so Instagram is just not for me. Twitter ended up as just being useless even before it turned into a cesspool. The algorithms throttled engagement. I post things that interest me, things that look like good reading, boost the signal for other writers, and I'm not interested in aggression or intolerance. That's very much my approach to social media.
I think
Sounds pretty marvellous to me.
Yeah, sounds fantastic. I think we will leave this this episode here. So join us next week for an interview where we'll be digging in to our regular questions with our new guest, Juliet E. McKenna.
Marvellous. You've all got a week to read 27 and 2 upcoming books, so crack on and we'll see you there.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of The Tiny Bookcase.
Remember to subscribe, otherwise you're going to miss out on the future fun.
Also, tell a friend. If you like this episode, link them to it.
We'd be tremendously grateful. You can follow us on Twitter at BookcaseTiny, Facebook at The Tiny Bookcase, and Instagram at BookcaseTiny for updates. Speaking of supporting the podcast, well, magic can only take one so far. The Tiny Bookcase is supported by the generosity of its patrons. Those kind souls have really kept my belly full the last year. Let's cast a spell for them, shall we? For rich ginger tones on their scalp, let us cast the Orangi Hedondo spell for Scott Byrne. And for general fabulousness, why not the Ooh La La How's Your Mother spell on Matthew McLaren?
How do you come up with that shit, man?